Presentation of the day, so we'll try to make it quick, keep it concise, so you can go out and explore this beautiful city a bit more. And of course, not forget about the hackathon results at 2 o'clock. Right, the presentation that myself and my co-presenter Aoife Brahimi from the Integration Centre in Ireland, we're going to be looking at one of the results of a project which has been running over the last 2 years. It's the RISE project. Now, many of you will have some familiarity with this project because the primary results of the project were presented as part of an hour-long workshop yesterday afternoon. What I'd like to do today is to go over the project again for any of you who are unfamiliar with it. I'd like to highlight its key outputs. I'd like to go through the games for a second, but hopefully final time. I think it's important to do that. It's an important celebration for us all, for the results of this long and often has been quite a difficult project. So I'd like to show you those games for a second time. And then I want to highlight one of the key results that we recognised during the project was going to be vital to its success. I want to go over the rationale of the trainer's handbook that was mentioned as part of the proceedings yesterday afternoon. And I want to really focus on the pedagogy of why that handbook is necessary and how we designed it, and ultimately what the result was, what it ultimately looks like. And then I'm going to hand over to Aoife, who has worked very hard with the project team to bring this handbook to fruition. Aoife's going to discuss the implementation of the handbook within the RISE project, and then we'll go into outline some of the results and how they relate to the final version of the handbook, which have come about through the piloting which took place this summer. And so that is our project website. RISE, Refugee Interactive Skills for Employment. You can see some of the beneficiaries on the board. The website is RISE Project. There is a link within the presentation. You also have a flyer within all of your conference packs. We do recommend that you visit the website because the website constitutes our primary platform for the dissemination of these materials. Hence, if you want to access any of the games I'm about to reference, or if you want to access the trainer handbook, or any elements of the curriculum which we've developed, this is the place that you need to visit to access those resources. Ultimately, that doesn't tell you a lot about the project though, it's just the home page of the website. And so the project is has aimed to remove the gaps in key competencies that are creating barriers to employment. These barriers are for refugees, asylum seekers, visitors to countries in the EU, namely our partners working here in the UK, in Ireland and in Germany. In particular, we looked to develop focused curriculum materials based upon the results of a needs analysis research that was conducted in 2013. And based upon the results of that research, we've also gone forward and we've developed some games-based learning approaches to try to address some of these gaps and the key competencies that these refugees are experiencing when they're looking for work in the 3 partner countries. So that's a second summary of those objectives. Emphasis on the vocational language, the cross-cultural communication skills, which we found to be quite an important barrier which our participants expressed as part of the research that we conducted in 2013. So that's something that we focused on in particular. The handbook has come about in the project as part of Objective 3. It's all very well and good developing these resources, but if trainers, facilitators, and ultimately if target users don't understand how to correctly utilise them, or what the potential benefits are, or how the materials relate to the wider pedagogy of the curriculum, the lesson plans which have also been developed, then the potential use, or the potential for them to be used efficiently and effectively, is diminished. We also sought to scope this content and test it, and really pilot it and get some solid results about its potential from our target audience, and that was conducted earlier this year. So, curriculum areas that we focused on are on the boards. You can see a variety of elements that we needed to address as part of the identified barriers to work within the UK, Ireland and Germany. Ultimately, the project existed as a transfer of innovation. I think it's worth emphasising this. What we sought to do was to take materials that already existed and to convert them, to deconstruct them, and then extract the key components and repackage it together so that these materials were re-specified for use with a different target audience. What we see on the board here are some examples of what we call value-added products, which we developed as part of the very early stages of the project. These are actually student games that were developed using the same project brief that we work towards as project partners and researchers. And it's these games and others that were developed by the project team in previous projects in previous years that we've taken as a basis or as a starting point for the games that we've ultimately constructed. And so the first game, Risky Business, that you probably saw yesterday, the focus of this product is on health and safety in the workplace. The projector here doesn't really do the game justice, it's quite a dark image, I appreciate that it's on the board. Ultimately, it's a three-dimensional simulation that Stephen took delegates through yesterday afternoon, and it gives potential employees who want to work in this area access to information about health and safety, particularly health and safety regulations here in the UK, and it also provides employers an opportunity to have a pre-test for employees for them to understand what their knowledge of health and safety is so that they can better create and orientate their health and safety induction based upon the needs of the employees. Game 2, similar platform using the same engine as Risky Business. This is Interview Expert, so its focus is on job seeking and preparation. Andy Burton quite kindly took us on a tour of the package yesterday afternoon. I've got the images here to show you what's going on. So you've got a variety of languages. You can see it's the interview scenario. You've got the desk, you've got the interviewers, you've got the interviewee in the room. You've got a collection of assets that are necessary when you're preparing and going into your interview that you need to familiarise yourself with. And there are links to information that we've published on the web also. Moving on to our mobile products. First of these is Email Know-How. The focus here is on familiarisation with formal writing, in particular written communication that you would conduct in an email with an employee of a company. You can see here the interactions that exist within the products. It gives you an email that you construct a reply to, and then it breaks down that reply and it gives you a score based upon the options that you've selected. And finally, Game 4, which proved to be one of the most popular games that we piloted with our refugees. This is getting there. This game has a focus on the awareness of workplace rights and responsibilities and access to services. This game originated from a very short anecdote from one of our participants about a taxi journey he had to a job interview. And he wanted to really share with us just how useful the driver of that taxi was in helping him to prepare for the interview he was about to take. And we thought that was a very interesting setting and context to have this information presented to one of our learners. And so you drive your car up the road, you avoid various obstacles, and then you have the option to collect health, and to accrue such health you have to answer questions about rights and responsibilities in the workplace and orientation of employment services in the EU. So these games have proven to be quite entertaining to our participants as part of the piloting that's taking place. But ultimately, we need supplementary material to help us to feel confident that these materials that we've spent 2 years developing are going to be used correctly and are going to be effective and useful as part of the development of the skills and the knowledge that these target users need. So, as part of our early needs analysis, we uncovered several things about our target audience. In particular, they have varying levels of literacy, they have a range of experiences with the various services about access into the workplace that exists in the UK, Ireland and Germany. Very strong issues with intercultural communication, the ability for the target audience to share their views, to be able to speak in public and to understand the nuances of how people in the UK, Ireland and Germany actually speak and communicate with each other. Ultimately, they had a range of digital competencies and in particular experiences with games. And so how could we convince target users that these products would prove useful as part of their development? Ultimately, we developed a variety of resources. We had the added problem that we ultimately constructed 4 games and 6 curriculum modules with associated lesson plans and a curriculum map to bind everything together. There's a lot of material there for any trainer to start to wade through and fully understand what its purpose is, what its function is, what its potential can be. We envisaged RISE and the resources to be non-prescriptive. We wanted to create a flexible approach that trainers could take elements of these resources and construct their own lesson plans, and they can embed the materials within a pre-existing teaching strategy. Ultimately, we looked at the requirements of a handbook, an additional supplementary resource for trainers that would assist them to assemble the information in the correct way. So we looked at the research and we also looked at some examples of where handbooks have been used in previous projects. We looked at the work of Minotia in 2009, who presented several considerations for the successful adoption of social software, software to be used in a social setting, not in isolation, not via a PC in your bedroom. The idea that you use it in a classroom with other people so that you can talk about your experiences. You have access to the thoughts and the feelings of other people. And Minotia focused the challenges that may exist in the deployment of social software initiatives, and she derived 4 factors or dimensions that positively influence and facilitate the adoption of such software. So, to continue the theme of our transfer of innovation, we sought rather to build our own handbook from scratch, to look at where handbooks have been used successfully in previous projects and to take some of those key elements as part of our own research. One project that we focused on in particular was the VIPI project. So the VIPI project finished in 2003, and it used, 2013, and it utilised a trainer handbook. It positioned this trainer handbook as a pedagogical framework, and we utilised the ideas that came from this handbook, which was based on the work of Minotia from 2009, as the pedagogical framework for our own project here in RISE. The handbook had 12 primary considerations for trainers to successfully use the VIPI resources, and it considered these considerations as directives. These are instructions, and they're presented as questions, which is quite important, so that trainers can assess their own situation with their own target users and deduce which of our resources are suitable for their specific requirements. That's an important aspect. And these directives were organised into 4 dimensions: educational, social, organisational and technical. And ultimately the result of this process was the RISE handbook. This is a 17-page document. It was constructed over a 2-month period, and it contains a variety of sections. I'd like to invite Aoife to come and share some of the important considerations that we had for the construction of this handbook, and also where this handbook has been used effectively as part of the piloting which has taken place this year.
Hi everyone, I'm Aoife Breheny from the Integration Centre, so I'll just continue on. So this is the long version of the Trainer's Handbook, the short version of the Trainer's Handbook, and we have a long one. So it provides instruction how to utilise the games and the curriculum in tandem, and breaks down where the modules correlate to the game content, so it makes it easy for trainers to pick up the guide and look at the resources and decide which parts to use with which games. The overall guidebook, if you like, or the handbook, allows trainers to figure out which content is most specific to the needs of the class that they have. And as Matthew was saying, we decided to break it down looking at a certain framework from the VIPI project and the different directives, the different questions that will be set to the trainer and provided with answers, so they can easily understand what different things they need to consider when they're using the different resources. And these are 4 dimensions: educational, organizational, social, and technical. So the purpose of the handbook overall is to make sure that the learning in both the resources, the interactive games and the curriculum, isn't lost and they're not used in isolation. They're used together to reinforce the learning from one to the other. It's also, as I was saying, to provide a quick guide for the trainers so they're not lost in the lesson plans. We did create a very large curriculum in the end because we felt that there was a lot of different skills gaps that the refugees and asylum seekers we interviewed and did workshops with at the beginning of the project identified as being very necessary for their orientation and integration into society. So there is a great deal of information and material there for trainers to wade through. And again, we wanted to structure it so they can see where everything correlates. And finally, to provide technical instruction. If they don't have much experience of using e-learning resources, we didn't want it to be too intimidating for them. And so there's a quick guide at the end to instruct them on that aspect. So when we piloted the project and the resources over the summer this year, we also asked the facilitators, the trainers that we used in different migrant centres and language classes to give us feedback on the trainer's manual. And they all happily reported that the handbook was very useful in Germany, the UK and Ireland, and it kind of highlighted the flexibility of the curriculum. You don't have to use the curriculum in sequence. You can use different sub-modules as you see fit for the class that you have and the different learning needs in the class. And again, with the games. When we piloted, we asked the trainers to use it as they saw fit, and usually they delivered a lesson plan, and then they allowed the students in the class to play the games in pairs or in groups of 3, depending on their level. And then they would have a discussion, perhaps. And it was reported to us that the co-learning aspect and the kind of peer mentoring that happened from the resources was done without much instruction. It kind of happened quite naturally, and it allowed for them to discuss then with the trainer the different issues that arose in the games and in the lesson plans, which we've incorporated into the trainer's handbook too. So in total, 25 participants took part between the 3 countries, all with certain type of protection status. So it might be refugee or leave to remain, or they might be awaiting status. And the trainers filled in lots and lots of documents and gave us feedback on how they got on with the resources, and specifically the trainer's handbook. So in terms of the educational dimension of the handbook, the questions that it poses to the trainer is to look at what kind of skills the participants have. Do they have much job experience in the host country they now find themselves in, or from their own country, and how can you discuss that in the class? Maybe the students who have more experience can reflect on that and discuss it with the students who have less and experience of going for job interviews, and how you bring that into the game. I think in the UK piloting, they found that when they went to play the interview expert game, which prepares people for job interview, they found that most of the students had never written a CV. So then they naturally went to the lesson plan and took the CV skills one and delivered that to the class. And then they discussed it, so it all happened quite progressively, which was good. We found, that they reflected each other quite naturally, the CV skills and interview skills, for example, the interview experts, and also the cultural awareness and nuances that arose in the getting there game and also the interview expert game was reflected again easily in some of the lesson plans. And we want to highlight that in the trainer's handbook so they realise where they correlate. Also, we found that in the games we've placed a lot of embedded links in different objects and posters in the rooms and in the games that have extra online resources or information, and this provided some independent research for the students to then go off and look for more information, which they all reported they liked a lot, which was great. Organisational. In the handbook we ask that the trainer looks at their own situation in the school or the centre they're in, and the curriculum that they have in use, and how can they use this one to bolster or complement the established curriculum that they're using. And the UK trainer, you know, this is a quote taken from how she found the resources, and she was quite happy with how flexible they were, you know, allowing her to kind of dip in and out and providing her with a different innovative way to teach. A lot of the time, the classes that are given to refugees and asylum seekers are basic computer skills and language skills, and so it's hard to keep them engaged, and especially if the prospect of employment is quite low. So there's different avenues that can be used, and this is one, so she was very happy with it. In terms of the social aspect, in the trainer's manual, we asked that they look at the class and look at the different situations that the people may be experiencing because of their immigration situations. Sensitivity has to be applied when they are delivering certain lesson plans, and also to look at the gender setup of the class. You know, based on cultural barriers, the trainer might need to take certain things into consideration when looking at the content of the games and the lesson plans before bringing them up and discussing them, maybe as to people's backgrounds and their education level and so on. And we found that in terms of the social aspect, the pair work, the group work, the co-learning that the games promote and the curriculum promotes was a very important aspect for the trainers to consider, how they match different participants together. And it happened quite naturally in all groups that they worked very well together, people with higher skills mentoring people with lower skills in terms of computer competency, and also the activities in the lesson plans, because a lot of them encourage role plays and so on. And finally, the technical aspect. We asked that the trainers make sure that their computers have, you know, specific web permissions set up, and they have the correct access to download the games and run the games to ensure that everything runs smoothly, because we did find in piloting that this was a bit of a hiccup, and it happened to a few of them that it was difficult for them initially to download the games and begin working with them unless they had this already set up and figured out with their ICT staff within the centre. And so some minor detail, but very important. And those were the 4 dimensions we asked that they consider. So concluding the project, obviously because of the target group, there's varying needs. Definitely in terms of language skills, computer competency, awareness of services and cultural nuances. And so the trainer really has to examine the games, the content which is specified in the trainer's handbook, and figure out what is most appropriate at that time for the class, and maybe pairing people of similar situations together. The target group as well, they're very transient, they may not arrive at a class every week, and so I think the fact that the lesson plans and the games are broken into these specific areas and have sub-modules allows the trainer to take one, deliver it, it'll reflect the content of the game, but it can be delivered on its own, and so the person doesn't have to write back to class the following week, because consistency in attendance is a difficulty with this group, and they all agreed on that. And further considerations going forward is this one, specifically the transient nature of the group, and how can they prepare for that. So we think that the trainer's handbook really looks at that and allows for the trainers to have a better grasp of what's involved in delivering the resources, and how to use them appropriately with that in mind. So that is it. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, let us know.
The Minoka's work on social software, okay, and the 4 dimensions, do you think that could be more widely applied to sort of different technology and maths learning?
It's an important area of research. We found when the work was presented to us by Professor Snell from Nottingham University, it's something that's often overlooked when you're considering the use of technology in a social setting, that the game itself doesn't always correctly communicate how to best apply it in a social situation. So you need supplementary materials, and Minoka really tried to dig into this by looking across a variety of different studies to really identify which areas of teaching practice required careful consideration when you were thinking about using technology and technological innovations in the classroom. It's something that we've embraced as part of the project. It's something that we have seen used in previous projects which members of the research team have been involved with. And hopefully, with the research that we've published as part of this project, other people will take into account the importance of these considerations when thinking about publishing their own work.
So, Matt, after your experience of applying this to refugee and migrant workers, do you think there's any dimensions that Minocha missed?
It's a very good question. As part of the piloting which took place, we haven't really focused on evaluating whether the 4 dimensions correctly capture all of the considerations that educators would have. Our initial goal as part of the production of these materials was to take an approach that we recognised has been useful in the past and try to transfer that approach as directly as possible into our own project. The considerations or the dimensions which Minocha mapped out, within those dimensions there are several questions. Within the VIPI project there were 12, and in the RISE project we've been more specific and we've derived a total of 16 questions. Many people may look at those questions and consider that some of them can be actually teased out and repackaged into a 5th dimension. What that dimension would be would require a bit more work, and it's certainly something which we would consider as a future project or a future aspect of a project to really try to nail down what these dimensions should be so that they are adaptable for a variety of different projects, and it reduces the necessity to redraft a handbook for every individual project. Hopefully it's something which is transferable, it's scalable, and I think there is more work to be done in that area.
I mean, I was thinking because we're currently doing a project looking at the impact of technology on learning labs. So I was wondering whether aspects of this work, because we're finding when you're talking to students about it and trying to look at things like what is their digital literacy and this sort of thing, that there's a social dimension to this about familiarity with technology outside the laboratory environment. Does it transfer to skill inside the environment? And so I think looking at these multiple dimensions is a really useful sort of thought.
That would be really good, because I think when we were doing the VIPI project, I wasn't sure of the significance of the framework, but Matt Leafer's project was a good test of it, really, wasn't it? And I think you pointed out some of the things that need applying to it, and it would be nice to test it out in another learning situation.
Because it's one of the things we're looking at is if you look at how you measure learning in laboratory situations, there's some work being done on that, but not as much as you might expect. Considering how in the technical subjects we all do labs, and there are things that we know work, like pre-labs and so on, but actually when you put technology on, and you look at things like what you do to the working memory limits and some psychological factors, that's where this sort of work can overlap into slightly different areas. So just musing on that.
The one I thought of in our context is around security, and whether really that's a separate issue or a separate dimension.
Yes.
Or whether it's covered by other dimensions, but it was so specific to the people we were working with in this project, it kept it going to mainly security.
That did come up in the organisational issue, I think, for Vicky, and I think when I talked to you about it, because obviously some of the places you were working, there's a lockdown on people being able to access certain websites, or even to get out to their own intranet there.
There's elements in both the organisation and the technical dimensions.
I just about tracking people and expect, people are registering for a new learning system, they'll be, they become transparent, they become, other people can see who's using the system. For migrant workers and refugees, that might make them targets as well, which is some of the stuff we talked about, which is almost like above an organisational level.
Very topical.
Very topical, yes, especially with the UK current political climate.
Yeah. But it is complex, because I'm an example at the OU, and the OU has always prided itself on its work, say, with the people in prisons. And of course, prisoners don't have access to the internet, and a lot of their frameworks now are online, and it's about how you provide alternate learning experiences to people who don't have access to some of these things. You can have standalone versions and so on that work in different environments.
Brilliant. Ethan now has to run to the train.
Any more questions?